And having said that, I think I've done a good job of contextualizing why this exists, what has happened in the past, and the fact that I am extremely honored and grateful that Amy chose to curate this beautiful series called Responsibility as part of the track of Unrehearsed Futures. And that today we have Mojisola Adebayo coming in and sharing her thoughts and her perspectives. Please, it is an intimate conversation. I know that we've got 36 people in, but if it's nice to see your faces, if possible. It's nice if you rename yourself. So like I've renamed myself Jehan M / the organization I'm from, so that we know where you're from. After opening remarks, etc., a couple of helpful prompts will happen in the chat window, but they're all designed to help you participate and be part of the conversation. This is not just speaking from the pulpit, it's a conversation. So without any further ado, I formally hand it over to Amy. Amy, thank you so much for continuing this beautiful series.
Thank you, Jehan. Thank you. Thank you, Mojisola, for joining us. And thank you all for joining us, being at the table this evening. I am in Tasmania, Australia, with a slightly unstable internet connection, so I hope there won't be any problems this evening. I would like to begin by welcoming Mojisola Adebayo and giving a brief introduction. I think most people in the room probably know a lot about you, Mojisola, but I'm going to just read a brief biog. So Mojisola has a BA in Drama and Theater Arts and an MA in Physical Theater and a PhD in Black Queer Theater. She trained extensively with Augusto Boal in Theater of the Oppressed Techniques. She's worked in theater, radio, television on 4 continents over the past 2 decades, performing in over 50 productions, writing, devising, and directing over 30 plays, and leading countless workshops from Antarctica to Zimbabwe. Among her publications are Mojisola Adebayo Plays 1 and Plays 2, 48 Minutes for Palestine in Theater in Pieces, The Interrogation of Sandra Bland in Black Lives, Black Words, as well as numerous academic chapters. Mojisola is an associate artist with Pan Arts, building the Anti-Racist Classroom Collective, ARCRE, and Black Lives, Black Words. Last year, she was inducted as Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and an Honorary Fellow of Rose Bruford College. Mojisola guest teaches at Goldsmiths and is a lecturer at Queen Mary, University of London. She's currently on a research fellowship at University Potsdam, Germany. And Mojisola, it is said of you that all of your work is connected and concerned with power, identity, personal and social change. So it's a great pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And just to recap, the title of this session is "When White Colleagues Listen," which is a reference to an open letter, of which Mojisola is a signatory, that was published that appeared in August of this year. And it's an open letter to UK Theatre, Dance and Performance Studies. It appeared in Scud, so it had, I think, an international impact. And it's in reaction to and in order to draw attention to systemic racism in our field. There was a great deal of talk about self-inclusion and a sort of way of practicing a dialogue. And so I wanted to say that as a white American who's benefited from privilege in all forms, often very, very subtle and unacknowledged. As I prepared for this evening, I felt nervous. I wondered, what if I get it wrong? And so I just imagine that that's not a totally unfamiliar experience for a lot of white people as they approach this huge topic, which is so important and revolutionary. And I'm wondering what you feel as you are invited to speak at such a discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the introduction, and also thank you for opening the discussion and the conversation, which I really hope we can all get involved in this kind of way. So that's much more a wondering and a reflection and speaking together, rather than looking, as Jahan said, to the pulpit for somebody with answers, which is not what I am or you are, or any of us here are. So yeah, and thank you for sharing how you were feeling, as it's kind of like academic forums are often so cold, and that we don't, you know, even if we work in theatre and performance, we don't kind of key into actually what's going on inside of us, even logging on, even with your camera off, what's going on inside. So I was also very nervous, very, very nervous, very anxious. And I was reflecting this morning on what that was about. It's partly because I insisted to myself that I would hardly prepare at all, because I haven't been invited to do a talk. I've been invited for us to talk together. So I thought, okay, but that can also breed a kind of anxiety when you don't have your notes and the thing that you're going to read and the thing you're just going to sort of say or do. And I had to keep reminding myself that I've been preparing all my life to talk about racism and dismantling racism. I've been in it all my life, and my ancestors have been in it for hundreds of years. And I'm doing this because I hope that my descendants and our descendants won't have to go on for another 400 years dismantling racism. So I was, also really nervous. It's also partly because when I'm talking about my own work as an artist, and I'm a theatre artist who works in academia, and that's kind of how I see myself. I'm very, very relaxed. I'm very easy, because I know what I make, I know what I do, I know what I've done and what I want to do, and it's really, really exciting. I get nervous, but it's a kind of nerves that is uplifting and kind of, but this kind of anxiety to speak about whiteness, to speak about racism, to be in a space potentially with a lot of white people, even if Drama School Mumbai have pulled us together, is really anxiety making, and it still is, even though I work in a space where I'm the two different spaces in Germany and at Queen Mary in London, where I'm the only person of African descent in those spaces. And I'm really pleased at Queen Mary, we, that's starting to change, that we have a colleague there of Asian descent, but still the feeling of isolation, the feeling that I have to protect myself, the risk, the pain, the trauma, what it reminds me of, how much it reminds me of all the racism and the racist incidents that I've been through. It costs me and other people of color, Black people, Asian people in white environments, it costs us many breaths, many, many extra breaths, many extra heartbeats, minutes, hours, weeks, months from our lives. It's a great cost to just exist, especially when we're in very white contexts, when we're trying to challenge racism in our work. And that's not even my area of scholarship. I'm not a scholar of anti-racism in higher education. I'm a theatre maker. It's just my life. So anxiety, stress, nerves, and I relate to what you're saying, Amy, about questioning, am I going to get it wrong? The question I have to push away, and am I going to get it wrong? I'm sure is a question that you kind of go, you know what, don't worry, you have to kind of put that question at bay and get rid of the judge. The question I have, and so many of us, people of color have, Black people, brown people have, is, am I wrong? that, you know, that's the question I have to get out of my head is, am I by my very existence wrong, invalid, worthless? You know, and that's not to put myself in a victim position. That's just to be really, really real about the voices I have to get out of my head. I you know, not that will I get it wrong, but that my existence itself is getting it wrong. You know, and there's trauma in that, and I can feel it in my breath. I can feel it in my body. I can feel it in my chest. I can feel it in my heart. So yeah, so I suppose an encouragement following on from that might be to anybody wanting to undo racism and dismantle whiteness and white supremacy is almost everybody is anxious, nervous, worried about either being wrong or getting it wrong. But you're not alone, and we're in this together. The same way the feminist movement, complex though it is and problematic though it has been, is together in dismantling patriarchy. That's what it's about. And we all need to be in it together to dismantle whiteness. And that doesn't mean we're dismantling white people or the people that believe themselves to be white, to quote Ta-Nehisi Coates. Patriarchy is not about killing men. And dismantling whiteness is not about hurting white people necessarily, or killing white people, ending white people themselves, whatever that means, you know. So if we're all in this together, it's nerve-wracking, it's anxiety-making, and we're not alone.
Yeah, yeah. There seems to be something extraordinary about this current moment. And the more we talk about it, the more we seem to be believing that there is something extraordinary about this current moment, where we're confronted with these issues which have really made us one planet. We've got, you know, a pandemic, we have a climate crisis, and we have increasingly widespread awareness of the kinds of geopolitical inequalities that have led to this new term, Black and global majority. And to a feeling that there must be a revolution. There absolutely must be an end to this construct whiteness, which is not, as you say, an end to white people, but an end to a certain type of paradigm. And you know, in terms of this current moment, I imagine that there are certain huge opportunities and also certain real dangers, that there are things that could be missed, that there are things that could make a U-turn. I mean, I'm very curious what your thoughts are about this current moment, what the opportunities and what the risks are right now.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I think and the more we talk about it, like you say, there's this more the kind of realization that that things could really change in terms of racism, challenging forms of fascism, thinking about climate and COVID, and yeah, it's what an incredible time to be here on this planet at the same time together. And yes, in terms of the opportunities and dangers, and I'm thinking particularly about that open letter, which there may well be signatories to that letter on this call, and it would be great to hear from those people. And if you folks haven't seen that open letter, white colleagues listen, it's widely available. I'm sure lots of people have, and maybe that's why you're here. And just because I just want to thank Royana, Mitra, Broderick Chow, and Lynette Goddard for bringing us together and collating that letter and creating that space. It was such a lot of work. And when I reread, and I did reread that letter this morning, I thought, wow, you know, coming back to your question, Amy, and your thoughts, there are so many opportunities. So what if white colleagues really did listen? What if they really did listen and do all the things on that letter, and respond? What might happen then? One thing I think might happen is that in drama schools and theatre departments, performing arts, dance, and everywhere, curricula would be much more exciting, much more challenging. Everybody would have to start to do loads more research and go, well, I don't know anything about South Asian dance traditions. How about I teach myself? How about I go to a class? You know, I don't know anything about capoeira in Brazil and how that connects with improvisation. I don't know anything about the Lindy Hop and how that was the origin of contact improvisation that is now considered such a kind of white movement form. I don't know anything about so suddenly a whole load of white people with their curricula, what they teach would suddenly get really interesting and new. And people would say, yeah, I know all about Capot and Brecht, but hey, I don't know nothing about capoeira. So I'm gonna teach myself, and suddenly curricula, I think, would get really, really exciting. I think we'd all be learning new stuff. We'd all be sharing ideas. I think the students would get very, very excited because they're always way ahead of us. I think that would be an opportunity for actually what we teach to be more relevant, more contemporary, more diverse, whatever. The danger, I think, would be for lots of crowing in teaching, just picking at, I'll have a little Bharatanatyam in my course, and we'll have a little capoeira, and we'll think about hip hop for a change rather than Brecht. We'll just throw all of that and we'll spice it up, and my courses will look great and my students will love me, and that'll be great for ref or whatever research analysis that you have. Ref is something that we have in the UK to kind of grade our research, and our TEF is something that we have to kind of grade our teaching. So we could be it could become very tokenistic, we could become very instrumentalized, and still whiteness wouldn't be undone and dismantled. It would just, everybody would just look better. You know, everybody would just be a bit cooler. I think cool has done nothing for Blackness. So, you know, in terms of ending racism. So I think that would be a big danger, that curricula would be really much more interesting, but white people would feel a hell of a lot better about themselves, and they would look good, but do nothing, and nothing would really change on the inside. Power structures wouldn't necessarily change. What else? If we really followed that letter, there might be more jobs. There might be more jobs for people of African, Asian, Caribbean, Latinx descent, indigenous folks teaching. There might be more jobs. But those jobs, the danger might be that those jobs are very low paid, on a lowest level, and that people are suddenly given a job in an institution, but are basically put in the basement. And that's been my experience, and not necessarily at Queen Mary, by the way, but that you get a job and you think, great, I'm the only person of color there, I'm the only Black person in this department, but suddenly I got a job. And actually you're at the lowest level, you're not supported, you're incredibly lonely, and everybody is expecting you to be the voice of the rest of the world. And then you've had massive pressure to get everything right. Massive pressure to know everything from Japanese no theatre to Beijing opera, to West African storytelling, to be the voice against racism. You know, the pressure, the stress of that on those people who are employed at low grade levels could be a massive danger. An opportunity is that people get promoted. People get promoted in positions. Black and Asian folks, people of color get promoted. But then again, similar stresses are very kind of lonely in those positions and aren't supported and are set up to fail and aren't mentored and offered training and given time, and overwork. You know, most people I know Black and Asian folks teaching in the UK that I know work far too hard. I know they are, because I can see the time they're sending me emails. Opportunities, you know, our friendships, alliances, solidarity, wonderful opportunities to become friends. Amy and I are meeting for the first time. Lots of us online here are meeting for the first time, getting to know each other. But again, I think there's a danger in that, as someone who's a Black woman who is friends to a lot of white people, and a lot of white people who I am their only Black friend, that somehow, and that's okay, but that somehow the feeling as a colleague and as a friend that I am you know, I'm a kind of badge, a badge of honor, a kind of passport, without saying the cliche thing of, oh, I've got a Black friend and she doesn't feel like that, but somehow that I am the permission, I give permission for all kinds of things and make a lot of white people feel better about themselves. And I know it. You know, I'm really, really aware of it. And I'm often invited by my white colleagues to shine their medals. You know, shine the medal that you've got that is anti-racism. Oh, well done. You employed a Black person on your course. Well done. Well done. You've diversified your reading list. Oh, well done. Good for you. So it's a great opportunity that we're friends. But the danger is that people of color, we just get exhausted by those friendships, and we're there to kind of shine the halos of white people. And it's tiring and really boring. Yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities, friendships, alliances, people getting jobs, curricula changing, and developing, promotion. But I think there's a lot of flip sides to all of those things. And it doesn't mean that we don't do all of those things, but that we're aware that we have to have, you know, reflective action, not just action, for example, employing people, but really think what happens after that. I'm on a real rant now.
Yes.
What do you think, Amy?
Well, I mean, no, I find what you're saying very exciting, and I'm trying to sort of, I have the good fortune of being unemployed, so I'm trying to imagine what it's like if I had my position, which I once did, and I were being challenged to, because it was in the book had been referred to as this kind of, you know, enshrined white pedagogy. And it was, you know, I felt suddenly a stab through my heart, because I thought, oh my God, you know, Lecoq, who I thought is so, you know, alternative, is you know, is this old white guy whose lineage I have carried forward. My friend Camille is in the room, and we wrote an article recently against the Lecoq canon, which was really terrifying for me, because it felt like I was attacking my own bread and butter. You know, this is the trade that I ply, is I'm a Lecoq pedagogue, you know, and if I have to try to, you know, teach capoeira, I look foolish, and I'm going to lose my territory. So I felt that it's sort of like if there's scarcity in the field, I imagine people are going to sort of hold on to what they've got. It seems to me that one of the things that is so important about this moment is considering the possibility of abundance. You know, that we can do this together, and we can make a much more. When you said there will be jobs, I suddenly, my eyes lit up. I thought, many jobs, you know, so it's like lots of jobs, like way more jobs in the arts, way more abundance. And then there's something about that, there's something about that feeling of abundance, which I think is prerequisite to our feeling an enthusiasm of that the future could be better. Is that wishful thinking in your opinion, or is there some? I don't know. I just see I see the movements as being somehow tandem, that we have to be optimistic as well. I don't know. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm enjoying the word abundance, and abundance in terms of learning and research and teaching, and and I'm thinking about the studio space or the Zoom space in which some of us are teaching and working, and getting excited about the possibility that that curricula has both Lecoq and Capoeira, for example, just to use those two examples. And I learn and love, you know, so much Lecoq training, and as well as lots of other kinds of training. And I'm sure my Black students don't want to not ever learn about Lecoq or Brecht or Grotowski. You know, they don't want less. They want more. You know, they want all of it. And so yeah, I'm enjoying the idea of abundance. A question mark is going off in my head about economies and jobs and all of those things that I think there is some, and it's kind of interesting. You were saying that you know you're unemployed at the moment. You're talking from that position, and I'm also at the same time enjoying the idea of abundance, questioning the in myself what I start to think about in terms of wealth and what we think of it as wealth, and the position that so many of us, me included, in a wealthy Western nation like Britain, where I was born and raised, and in Germany, where I live, that I'm so used to the idea that there will be a social welfare state, there will be a safety net for me, I won't really probably go hungry, that I'll probably get a job, all of those things that actually, and perhaps a lot of people experiencing this during COVID-19 in the Western world, that whatever that is, that we can also question that which we've put on that kind of altar, you know, of capitalist kind of success, of how much do we actually need, and what are we prepared to have less of? Because the only way for there to be an end to the climate crisis, a reversal or a pause at least, or a holding back of the climate crisis, or you know, for millions of people to come out of poverty, to, you know, all of those things that are absolutely racialized, is for the West, for whiteness, for white people, for people, you know, working in those huge, in the G7, to have less, you know, to have less, maybe to do less, to be less successful, yeah. And so how about that? And the idea of that for most people, you know, most people in my world, it's just like, it's like not even something that people even contemplate. I remember I had my first experience of being in India. I was very, very honored and privileged, and still am, to have been invited by Malika Sarabhai at Darpan Academy of Performing Arts in Ahmedabad, and John Martin at Pan Arts in London, who were working closely together at the time to be a co-founding trainer of an organization called Vidya, which is a theatre company that is made of people who come from the slums of Ahmedabad, and they do theatre for social change around girl-child education, girl-child rights. And one of the very first, the most important thing at the very beginning for me as an outsider, as a Westerner, as a British passport holder, was to make sure that we would make ourselves redundant as quickly as possible, that we would be completely unnecessary. And we are. I am unnecessary to Vidya, so is Malika, so is John. and they have an attachment with one person who didn't grow up in the slums, but basically the company is run independently. That happens in India all the time. That happens in different places. People on this call can speak much more to that than I can. But in England, for example, the idea that effectively a homeless people's theatre company, a slum dwellers company, that the directors of that company, that the people who start that company, their ambition could be to make themselves redundant. That a professor's ambition could be to get out of higher education and to make space for people who are much less privileged. That could be an aim, that could be on your job description. It's just completely like off what you mean. I won't have 2 cars, 4 holidays, 5 bedrooms, and all these books. You mean I would lose some? It would cost me. I would have less. Yeah. So I'm really into abundance, and I'm reminded that Karl Marx traveled first class. Because he believed that everybody should travel first class. So I don't mean we should all go hungry, but I think that we can also question, we can also think about what it costs and what we lose and what's wrong with that,
Yes, well, very well put. And of course, there's so many now progressive movements that are talking about some type of socialism as being a way of creating an abundance where you have less and you have more at the same time, because people around you have more, and therefore we all have more. I'm just wanted to mention, move on to one last topic before we open up to the room, because we're getting to that time. The question of alliance and the qualities of an accomplice. So when I read the open letter, I felt this kind of surge of crusading adrenaline, and I thought, and then there was this. Just to be totally honest, there was this sense of like, oh, I could do well, I could be good, I could shine, I could be the white colleague that listens. Okay, so just to fully acknowledge that bit. And then I start thinking about this sort of squeaky clean quality, and that's where I really start feeling not so much like an ally, but an alloy. I feel like I'm much more of an alloy. I'm sort of a much more complex, muddy mixture of materials, not totally dependable, and having some mixed motives. And there's a need to sort of be able to be myself in all of my complexity in the alliances. I feel that's sometimes quite a difficult space to negotiate.
Yeah. I love your ownership of the kind of, I could be the good white person. I could be the good one. I could be the one who listens. I love that. I love being honest about that. And I think that's going on all the time. So what are the qualities of alliance that's more like alloyness, alloy? I mean, I don't know. I would love to. I can respond to that, but I'd be much more interested, honestly, really honestly, not to just kind of renege on my responsibility as the catalyst for the conversation. But I'd love to hear what other people think about that, potential allies. I know as an ally of, let me put myself in another position for a moment. As an ally of folks in a country that shall not be mentioned, so that I shall not compromise anyone, to be an ally of friends in a particular country at the moment where there's a particularly vociferous rise in fascism in that country. how am I an ally? I'm an ally by checking in with friends and colleagues in that country, but without exhausting them, for constant kind of permission, taking care not to make them vulnerable, working slowly. I think I've noticed a big rush with Black Lives Matter and responding to that, and a big rush of statements that came out after the murder of George Floyd, and a big rush to do stuff and say stuff. And I would have appreciated more pace, more care, working a little more slowly, negotiating action together, a bit more consultation, not so much so in a way that it just gets wrapped up in kind of bureaucracy. I don't mean about writing loads of reports and studies and things like that. I mean just a bit of more checking in, a bit more sensitivity, an awareness of what it costs. Coming back to my friends in a fascist country right now, an awareness of the stresses and dangers that they experience, an awareness of what it can do to the possibility of a long and healthy life for them. And to, but I think it's different in different contexts. I'm trying to put myself out of the position of a black woman talking about whiteness, more in the position of a British person talking about, friends who are in another context, in a kind of under a very oppressive context right now. So, regularly checking in, asking questions, listening, working slowly, and letting the risk be mine, But I'd be really curious to know what other folks think, to be. Those are my reflections on being an ally in a different kind of context.
Yeah. Well, why don't we let people, why don't I do this? I will call out the questions in the chat, and then rather than reading your question, why don't you then unmute yourself or your comment or question or whatever it is. So does that work? Because otherwise I can't see all the hands because there are 3 pages. I'm seeing you, Kanan. Why don't you unmute yourself? Kanan, sorry.
Shannon,
sorry.
Right. There's a couple of things that I wanted to kind of bring up before we talk about the alloy dichotomy. I just wanted to say, how do you address the tokenism in academic arts, or the discrimination that inhibits your progression in that field? This is to Moji. I mean, you've mentioned it, I've experienced it, but it kind of chokes me because I don't know how to deal with it. It's not an obvious, wow, you're being racist. Saying that is like, what do you mean? But how do you deal with that? The indignation that you blatantly can see it, but it's so subtle, and it's so I think ingrained in the institution to the point where it's norm. And how do you deal with that? Can you overcome that? How do you overcome that? And do you know what I mean? I think particularly when I did my PhD at Central School of Speech and Drama, and they had a huge debate with the head there, and I was talking to Silver. Full name. Sylvan, yes, Sylvan, and we were talking about this whole thing. And I said to him, "What's going on?" And I said to him, "I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I've never been able to put my finger on it, but there's always, if they give you, I'm not naming CSSD, as the institute, but in general, it took a lot for me to actually acknowledge that I'm an academic in the first place, because I've always seen myself as an artist. I'm a writer, director, the art, and for me, I had to overcome this sense of it's a privilege to be an academic, to be recognized as an academic, not just because I've done a PhD, but because I actually am involved in the politics of the arts, and I can articulate myself. And people say, "Oh, you don't act like a doctor," and you're thinking, "Well, what is a bloody doctor supposed to act like?" Do you know what I mean? I'm an artist, but I am an academic, and yet it took a while to actually accept that mantle, but then to go into the institutions that some way make you feel like you are just not worthy. And you know deep down, you can sense that there is an element of I think it's a racial thing. I think it is a racial thing. And how do you deal with that? How do you address that?
I feel with you, Janan, and and just sharing in these like we are sharing right now, and you mentioned Sylvan, and seeking out those friends and colleagues and who know what you mean and nod their heads and can connect with that, I think is really important in terms of taking care, because otherwise it can start to feel very internal, like is it me? Is something going on here? This isn't okay. I do think that whole self-care thing is really important, and finding your other friends and colleagues within this kind of world, as as we are, and feel free to reach out more as well, and we can do that. We can have those conversations. I think I found it important to keep a note of things. I used to, at Goldsmiths, I kept a file in my email, and I love Goldsmiths, and it's my heart college, is my university, and I will always love that place and many colleagues there, but I kept a file called, no disrespect to anyone who's ever suffered mental health problems, but I'm going to be honest, my file was called Bonkers, and which is a very rude way of talking about mental illness. So I don't mean to disparage mental illness in any way, but that was the name of the file that I kept. That it was, and I kept many emails that had been sent and CC'd into that were appalling. I wrote things down. I kept a record of things and things that I can recall. It's been very painful, but I've, as my colleagues at Queen Mary know very well, I've called things out that I thought were racist behavior and propping up white supremacy, and added my voice to that letter. But it was very painful, very, very painful. And very painful to have white people telling me how much it hurt. And then me thinking, wow, you have no idea.
Exactly. But also the conflict, when you initially spoke about, dismantling white supremacy and dismantling this, this patriarchal structure that has been actually driving society for so long. I find it tough to deal with the conflict of facing up to these discriminatory acts, however subtle they are. And it is that you do get people who say, "Me? What are you talking about?" Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, you're using the race card or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And not everyone has the strength to address that conflict. Not everyone is, it's really, it's tough, because sometimes I get mad at myself thinking, you should say something. You should say something. I find it better to say something about other people if I see injustice to other people, than to myself. I find it much more, you know, I can fight someone else's corner, but when it comes to my own, I don't know. I just feel like maybe I'm not eloquent enough, or maybe they're just gonna say, oh, you're reading it all wrong, and you know, like if you're in a court of law, I don't think I can articulate myself as well as the you know, the opposition, if you want to call it. And it's that word conflict is always like, even when I'm reading things on you know, social media and the news and the injustices that are happening, yeah, I make comments, and sometimes I'm shocked by people's comments, and I think, oh my God, do people actually exist that think like this? But it gets exhausting. I understand what you're saying, that it's exhausting it's like shoveling snow while it's still snowing. And sometimes I just feel like I need to take a step back, because I can't do this single-handedly. And it is, and sometimes I just don't have the courage to face that conflict. And then I get mad at myself.
Yeah, I mean, I really relate to what you're saying, and I'm sure lots of other people do. And I would say, you know, one of the ways in which racism works is that it gets inside and makes you question yourself, and it makes you massively doubt yourself. It's a psychological condition, you know, that we're experiencing, and I think that's where support is really important. Support from other people who you can trust and you feel that understand, but also to not get mad at yourself for not speaking up, because it's not about courage. You're actually trying to go to work. You're trying to do your work.
Yeah.
And keep going. So it doesn't necessarily, you're an incredibly courageous person. I know you a little bit, Janet. So it's not about courage. It's about abuse. You know, one would never, you know, say to a victim of, you know, a physical abuse or a sexual abuse, you're not having the courage to speak up. What we need to address is the abuser and the abusive institution that makes you feel that you're not good enough, and gives you so many things that you have to speak up about. So I'd say that something about keeping a record, even for yourself, is that you will use at a particular time, can be really helpful. I many years ago, I took a theatre company to court for racial discrimination, and it was the keeping of records that meant that I won that case effectively, and that we settled. And that was also a very empowering thing to do, you know. And sometimes you literally are going, you know, sometimes that can be you know, part of your evidence in a discrimination sort of case. So I think keeping, you know, writing things down, and also bringing the work back to the white colleagues. So, for example, the very first job I had was a college called St. Mary's College. An old friend of mine, Joe, I think is on the call. We worked together there. And I remember when I started there, it's my first job in academia, my first full-time job in academia. I was shown reading lists that the students had over the summer holidays, first years coming in, recommended plays that they should read before starting their drama degree. And every single play on that list was written by a European, a white European, and almost every play was by a man, and all of them were dead, apart from Carol Churchill. And that was the reading list. And that went to my gut. I think what I should have done, turning back the clock, what I could have done, not should have done, what I could have done, is to hand that reading list back to the person that gave to me and said, what are you going to do about this? You know, just leave it there. What are you going to do about this reading list? There's a problem with this reading list. Have you noticed? And that wouldn't have earned me any friends, but I got friends. Yeah, your colleagues don't have to be your friends. But I was scared, and it was hard, and I was new, and I was young, and I was like, oh wow, I should be grateful, and so many of the things that you're mentioning. But giving the work back. The other thing is, what I did do was I got a budget. We'll have a little bit of a budget, and I made sure that if any pound rupee, any euro that came my way, I would use it to dismantle whiteness. So I went to the library. I noticed there was not one single play by a Black person on those shelves, and that is that first university I worked in. And by the time I left, there were loads of plays. So I used my budget, and I only ever bring Black, Asian, people of color, Middle Eastern people in to teach on my courses. Maybe sometime I bring in somebody with a disability who might be white, somebody who's also less privileged. But I don't, if I have access to any kind of budget, I'd use that to dismantle whiteness. And I also encourage colleagues to do that as well. So I have more power than I think I have sometimes. And I just focus on my teaching and what I can do with the students in the space. And don't give yourself a hard time about, but I do think it's empowering to keep a record, because it reminds you that you're not, to use that very impolite word about mental health, bonkers, that it's not that there's not something wrong with you, there's something wrong with the institution.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that dialogue. I think that was really great to listen to. And I'm just trying to go chronologically to see if people still want to speak out. Melissa and Apeksha, did you want to speak out something? I don't. I think Melissa, you were first. Melissa? Nope. Apeksha, did you want to say something?
Yes. Okay, so I actually want to bring a slightly different perspective, because like in India, we have a very similar situation going on vis-a-vis caste. And while whiteness and the caste question, I mean, whatever, race and caste cannot be equated to each other. There are like strong similarities and strong parallels in terms of the experience of caste and race. And for me, it's been a really an important moment to realize that as a privileged person, or a person who belongs to a Savarn caste, that like to reckon back with all the ways in which I have fucked up in the past. Sorry to use the explicit word, but it is a fuck up, like it is just like you have screwed up very badly because you just didn't know better. And so educating yourself as the discourse is allowed to even come out into the world is also a moment of reckoning with yourself, with your own failures in the past, with hoping you had done better. So it's like it's kind of like the shadow of the wanting to be an ally kind of thing, right? Like, why do you want to be a good ally? Is because you have all of this past behind you, which you're very aware of constantly, and you embody all your failures. You have all of that feeling in you that you're trying to grapple with. And so the easiest way to do it is be like, oh, no, look, I'm a good person. You just kind of need to validate that to yourself. So I know that for me, and for me, my theater practice has a lot to do with this, because it comes back to the idea of embodying all of these experiences, right? Like the embodiment, for instance, of caste is something that I have only come to understand, or like even touch the tip of when through theater, through the body, because otherwise you say, oh, like caste, whatever, like it's some theoretical idea, but then you come back to what it means to embody whiteness, or to embody Savarn feminism, even for that matter, like Savarn feminism, like white feminism, has a very particular kind of embodiment of politics, etc., etc. So I was curious to know what your thoughts on that were, in terms of just like embodying all the various aspects of it, and then like almost having an embodied conversation. And what I mean by this more specifically is that I've been noticing for me that in the past few months that these conversations have become so much more intense, both in India and abroad, that there is a lot of rage, and this rage is generational and ancestral, and one understands the need for this rage to come out. I remember my own rage as a woman, you know, like just fighting the patriarchy without having a lens of caste, for instance. So I empathize with the rage completely, but at the same time knowing that this time the rage is directed at you, you know, rather than you being a part of the people who are raging against somebody else. And so what does it mean to absorb the rage? You know, what does it mean to know that you have to absorb it and process it and make place for that rage, you know, as a person of privilege? It's I don't know if I'm exactly making sense, but it's a very embodied experience of of participating politically, which for which you don't have anything to show or shine a medal on. But I think for me, this is what my political practice um, pushes me to do, is to be like, no, you have to first and foremost be truthful to your own self. And it's not about performing that you're a good political ally, but to confront yourself, you know, constantly be in confrontation with yourself, because there is so much that you need to unpack about what it means to come from privilege. Do you know what I mean? And so, okay, so in all of this, I really feel that theater has the room, and Boal's techniques particularly have the room to enable this conversation. You know, to enable a conversation where we can speak about the embodied experience of race, of caste, what it feels like to be in that space, what it feels like to, you know, and then how do we work through the rage, the grief, the pain together, is you know, find a way towards care together, find a way towards love together. I mean, I see it happening in feminist spaces in India, like with the caste question, but I'm very curious to know how I, as a theater practitioner, can contribute to making that conversation more valuable.
Yeah, I mean, Apeksha, I resonated with what you said, is that the ability to have to do the work is actually the ability to meet yourself. That's really the privilege of it. Also, is to meet yourself, rather than shining your medal. Is really, you know, to know yourself better, to know myself better. I totally agree with you. That really resonated. Mojisola, did you want to say something?
I was curious to know if other people had responses to that, particularly in terms of the caste question.
Jihan, did you want to respond to that?
No, so I've been thinking about, so as a head of school, one of the things we have, and this is something I really did want to bring up because I found myself reacting very badly to it when it came up, which was, for 7 years, we have practiced a ritual at the beginning of the school day, which is a shlok from, it's called the Natya Tattva Stuti, and it basically speaks about, it's a prayer to the body, the voice, the costumes, and therefore the universe around it, and how in all of this it is ultimately towards the deployment towards the performer's deployment towards finding the ultimate truth. But the word ultimate truth is referred, I mean, this is my interpretation of it. This is how I have used it. This is how we have ritualized the use of this shlok at the beginning of the morning every day. The ultimate truth comes from a Savarna word, which is a Satvik Shivam, and the idea of this, it's purity, and to loosely analogize it, it's a puritanical. It could be equated violently as a puritanical purity versus just a pure truth. And we got a response back this year saying that this promotes the Savarna caste structures and hierarchies, and you know, it's making me very uncomfortable to do it, to perform it, to use it, and my reactions. And a couple of people in the room who I had quiet chats with on the side, where I felt like, suddenly I'm in the position of, I'm from also the irony of this is that I'm from total privilege, but colonial-based privilege that has nothing to do with the caste system. I'm Parsi. I'm English speaking. We were the great employees of the Raj, and the first civil servants and all of the wonderful things. And so we were that new elite class. And so caste privilege and all of that comes from a whole other body of existence and knowledge, and it's not even part of my experience. I was like a crow when we put together the drama school, and we adopted this ritual in, and we experienced it, and I experienced it with my students every day for 7 years. Apeksha was here, experienced it, and we spoke about it. I mean, we used it for our purposes, which was to constantly remember where our quest for body, voice, and mind. And so I came to this practice completely divorced from all of that, and then suddenly find myself in this position where I have to think about dismantling it and reacting so badly against that idea because I never adopted it in the first place with that baggage or with that legacy. And I actually want to ask the question of dismantling versus, instead of dismantling, and I went to Amy with this, and there's this idea, and a couple of weeks ago, Sarah Machet spoke from the University of Cape Town, where there was this whole Rhodes Must Fall, the statue of Cecil Rhodes, Rhodes Must Fall. And what about this idea of not dismantling, but remantling, or instead of taking away stuff from the canon, adding more stuff to the canon? For our English colleagues here, I mean, like one of my favorite sort of post-colonial throwbacks in your direction is that, chicken tikka masala. I mean, this is what you get for colonizing India, right? You get a dish in your country, which is so it's adding to, and that's where I've been. But I feel like even making these arguments now feels weak. Feels like I'm missing something much bigger, and then I find myself in a position where I don't know what to do. And so when I don't know what to do, I just want to go back to, well, why does this work for me? I mean, Mojisola, you spoke about using the word bonkers in your folder, and then you kind of caveated it completely, but you knew why you called it bonkers. It made sense to you. You didn't intend it to be something that is there as disrespect to people, with mental conditions or anything like that. Your intent was solid, but yet, yes, that word on the folder, the use of my ritual, it's causing somebody a problem, and therefore that's where I am, and I'm at this sort of space of stuckness right now.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I would, and thank you for bringing my own kind of reference into the kind of discriminatory practice that I didn't even think about when I named my folder bonkers. And when I think about that, I think, actually, what did it cost me to name my folder that? And what would it cost me to rename my folder? This is a folder I used to have. But what was the great sacrifice, and what do I lose, and what do I gain? And to make changes and move on from rituals and take down statues and change those things. I think it's, when we're in a position of privilege, it's also to really ask ourselves, what is this great pain? What is this great cost? So I might ask, and other people can speak to the cost system very eloquently. But in terms of racism, I can say with total confidence that it's cost me heartbeats, it's cost me breath, it's cost my mental health, it's cost my physical body sometimes in terms of physical abuse, it's cost my income, my ancestors, 60 million of them transported across the sea, it's cost lynching, it's cost murder, it's cost inequality, it's cost and how those things impact my life. It's cost jobs. It's going to cost my children, my nieces and nephews, my cousins. It's cost Nigeria. I mean, it's just like, I mean, come on. I mean, it's just like the cost is one can't even express the cost, the personal cost and the cultural cost of colonialism, racism. I mean, and somebody wants to cry about a dead man on a horse in Cape Town. Take that shit down. It didn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost you anything. What does it cost you? Not you, Jahan, of course, is what your white pride and your sense of self. And it makes you go, oh dear, oh, you know, like, oh, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Come colonize these people. Maybe the caste system, maybe that's actually really fucked up. Maybe even if it isn't my culture, maybe it's just actually not cause. We'll just come up with a new ritual. We'll change the words. We'll undo history together. We'll work it out. It'll be messy. I don't know how to do it. Let's talk about it. I don't know. But what's it really going to cost me? I might learn something new. You know, when we were working with Vidya, I'm not Muslim, but I introduced a Muslim song because I wouldn't, because it's a Muslim Hindu group in Ahmedabad in the year 2000. If we're going to sing a Hindu song, we're going to sing a Muslim song as well. And I'm not a Muslim, but we're going to sing Allahu Akbar together, peacefully. And we're going to work it out and see how it feels. And it's going to be messy. It's certainly messy because I'm a Danish Nigerian non-Muslim teaching an Islamic song in Ahmedabad. What the hell is that? It's a mess. It's complicated. It's not neat and tidy. It's not a quick fix. But, you know, and that actually cost me nothing, you know. But for the Hindus in the room, that costs something. And for the Muslims in the room to be taught by a non-Muslim to say, hey, how about that? You know, I just think that's what privilege is. That's what I'm dismantling and undoing privileges, caste privilege, race privilege is. One has to move. It has to do something. But we know as theatre makers that as soon as you move, you know, that's the source of improvisation. Something, if one doesn't move in text, in thought, in body, nothing happens. We have to improvise our way to some other way of being. Messy, full of mistakes, clumsy, but we have to. Because it costs someone else far too much, because it just hurts. You know, we have these ridiculous debates in Britain about the N-word. And I remember sitting in a meeting where somebody said, oh, well, you know, but I teach literature from the 17th century. And if I don't use this word, if I don't speak this word out loud, well, you know, I'm going to have to teach differently. And I'm like, yeah, I have to teach differently. What does it cost you? But every time you use that word, those students feel a bullet in their belly. If you know, what is it? So it costs them a great deal of pain. It costs you an hour or two sitting in a cafe, having a coffee, thinking about how you're going to approach the use of the N-word a little bit differently. You know, I think, yeah, I don't know. What do other people think? Or do we want another topic? Or I don't know.
Well, there's Catherine has had her hand up for quite a while. Catherine, did you want to speak out what you wrote in the chat or something else?
That's a while back.
It is.
Yeah, I have to look back and find it.
Hi, Mojisola.
I'm sorry?
Hang on a second, Elizabeth. Hang on just one moment. Let's just let Catherine.
Sorry, it was a mistake. I opened my mic.
It's okay. No worries. No worries.
Well, anyway, this has been wonderful. Just wonderful. I'm so thrilled and privileged to sit here and listen to you today, because so many of the things that you have expressed, you know, I have been the only Black tenured professor in my department for 34 years. And I just handed in my resignation. But to be in that position, you know, through time and all the different political things that have happened into this moment in real time, and the constant marginalization and silencing to bring something up has been continuous. And even in this moment where we are champion undoing racism, you know, with panels of white people that don't want to listen to you, or if you do, say something, which I have through the years, the next meeting, I could have my hand up for an hour and no one's going to call on you. You know what I mean? There's an immediate punishment for how dare you say we're racist. I'm not. I'm, you know, so that kind of hand holding you constantly have to do while you deal with, you know, really abusive behavior. It's not intentional, but it's just from living in a way, living under privilege for so long. And then every now and then something happens where minorities, you know, their voices are screaming. I did a play that was on the situation that's going on with the Latino community in this country. Babies snatched away from their mothers, like in Nazi Germany, you know, or Spain. Yeah, the plight of the undocumented worker and the Palestinian and their history, you know, bringing in the history of how the Palestinian has had to move around. And I was absolutely, tempted to be destroyed and lose my job for doing that, from a white person who thought he was defending the Spanish kids. You know, these kids in this cancel culture are just looking for the next thing to go berserk over. So, I mean, at this point in time, I've handed in my resignation. I will continue to teach part-time. I have done work for the Asian kids, for the Black kids, the Latino kids, all along. Now, just this past week, there was a performance, virtual performance on race. There's a play going around and everyone's sort of doing this before the election and so forth. And the questions that came up were totally philosophical, you know, philosophical questions and everything moving towards what is an authentic, what does it mean to be an authentic leader? You know, and I was bringing in the country moving towards fascism. And, you know, can we come down to earth? No matter how high the bird flies, he must come down to earth to eat. You know, so let's come down here and attack for that. You know, it's almost like that unwillingness to even take in the experience of a Black person in the screen. It's like, well, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about. You're talking about race. Isn't the title race here? You know, so breaking through that and with, you know, different people with the utmost sincerity. You know, I'm not saying white people are bad. I'm not saying that at all. But that sense of privilege, what it does, that colonial mentality, what it does, and how hard it is to like get in there and even provoke serious reflection rather than defensiveness. You know, it's difficult, you know, and the last frontier is language itself. You know, I had a little student, I have an assistant, Lecoq, you know, who comes in. He's absolutely wonderful. I adore him. But I have Black kids that are from the ghetto who grew up in storefront churches, and they're in the class too. And the young lady was talking about there's one God and he's the only leader and whatnot. She was attacked by someone of privilege from the suburbs. So, you know, I'm an atheist and what you said and blah, you know, the crosstalk is devastating. I mean, the girl was devastated instantly. It was like, well, I agree with you. I agree with you. Do you see what I'm saying? You know, these, and I spoke to him afterwards because he wanted to stay into authenticity of leadership rather than dealing with all voices must be heard and respected. So I don't know if this is a statement or a question, but I know you know what I mean.
Yeah. I really do.
There you are. And thank you. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing and for your 34 years of service. There's also that will continue and make, and I'm sure flourish even more beyond the institution, or one institution. It's great that you're keeping teaching and doing your work, but also having time for yourself. And this is the first time we're meeting, so it's good to meet you and everybody here. But yeah, I do know what you mean, and I think that there is so much emphasis on how people feel, how white people feel, and people in privileged positions feel, and it's most of their feelings are really not useful or important. You know, like, just because you feel it politically, you know, doesn't mean it's really relevant. Actually, it doesn't mean it's that important to actually changing anything. You know, it really doesn't matter how. I mean, one might have to manipulate men in, you know, boardrooms and institutions, and one might have to massage a few feelings and whatever. But it's actually how men feel about political power in houses of parliament, voting institutions all over the world, how men feel in boardrooms, how men feel, you know, in the family when women's voices are just as important. How they feel isn't actually, you know, we need to work with those feelings because sometimes those feelings can get in our way. But as women, it's not really important. It's really not that relevant how you feel about it. What's really relevant is 52% of the world population is female, and men dominate the boardrooms and institutions all over the world, and we need to change that. And, you know, that's really, I mean, it's like, come on, let's get beyond white people's feelings. And I think, you know, let me go all out now, right? So I think one of the things I find recurring in higher education, that I've been involved in since 1998, is, and in particular in the field of theatre and performance, is that most teachers in theatre and performance are women, and in Britain, and most of them are white women. And so there is I found, you know, very often a weird kind of tension, right? Because white women of my generation and older have been, you know, fighting patriarchy. Many of them are feminist, been trying to dismantle patriarchy and really working hard at that and dealing with their feelings about all of that and having to fight. And then along I come and go, well, you need to work on this shit. You need to do, you know, you need to have a look at your curricula. You need to address your language. You need to question your position, your privilege. And a lot of my, the blocks that I get are not from white men, from white women in higher education. And so, and I think that, and I think there's something in that, and I know it's massively general, but I think there's something in that, and there's not about attacking white women in this space. It's not about that, but it's about noticing those blocks, and why are those things recurring, and why do other colleagues of mine also talk about this recurring, right? And I think there's something about the projection onto the white man, because he's been the baddie for so long. We're on safe ground when we talk about that. And in my experience, the white guys will just go, yeah, you're right. You know, what should I do, Moj? You know, I find it much easier a lot of the time to talk to white men about it, because they're so used now in higher, I'm talking about in the specific context of drama, theatre, performance, education in Britain. Other people's experiences are different. I'm just speaking from my truth. But I find it much, much easier to talk to white men in those contexts, because you know, if they're in their 40s, 50s, they've lived through feminism and they're teaching in a field that is dominated by women, then they probably had to do some homework and something to deal with it. And I know this is not everybody's truth, but it's my truth. But I find it much, much easier, you know, much easier to challenge, much easier to have a good old rant with. Whereas my experience of white women in higher education in theatre is somehow, because of the kind of protection of feminism, and that we've had to have all of these fights. And don't you dare question me. I couldn't possibly be an abuser, you know. And I think to myself, hang on, what were you doing for 400 years on the plantation? Didn't you see what happened? You know, what were you doing for all of that? You know, what were you doing in the big house? You know, it's bullshit. White women in higher education, in theatre and performance got away with not dealing with their shit. And then when you challenge something, it comes back to their feelings about it. It's really not that important. Just do something. Have a look at your budget, see what you can do. Have a look at your curriculum, see what you can do. Have a talk and listen, preferably to Black, Asian, people of color in your departments or your students, and see what you can do. Get involved collectively, see what you can do. Make something happen, change something, let it cost you something. If you're losing some money, it's probably a good thing. You know, just do something, stop worrying about your feelings. That's, you know, but so many of these conversations come back to how, you know, to this kind of hurt, and it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting for the rest of us. And none of this means white women are bad. It means whiteness and white supremacy is shit. It's evil, and it must be dismantled, disrupted, pulled down, and something must be recreated. And white women, you got away with it for too long. Do something about it. Over to you, Amy.
Okay. I've decided to be off-white. I'm not going to be white anymore. I'm going to be off-white.
Because whiteness doesn't exist anyway, right? So it's a construct. It's a construct that comes out of racism, you know? So that's the whole point. It's just made up, you know? Any Irish person on this call will know that Irish people got a passport into whiteness. Jewish people got a passport into whiteness. Reluctantly, maybe. Italian, Spanish. It's bullshit. It's racist. The idea, it's all racist. So that's what I mean by dismantling whiteness, is because we need to get to a world where it doesn't even exist anyway.
Thank you so much, everybody, Mojisola, everybody, for this really marvelous Truth Fest. Can't thank you enough. Thank you so much, Jehan and Drama School Mumbai, for hosting this. And I deep apologies to everybody who wanted to share. There's so many comments in the chat, and I think we could have gone on much longer, but we have to conclude.
Oh no!
I know.
Is it bedtime in Australia as well?
No. It's just it's the DSM hard stop, right, Jehan? We have to stop.
The hard stop is okay. So yeah, so
we passed the hard stop.
Maybe finish your concluding remarks, and then I'll take us into the soft space.
Okay, thank you. So yes, thank you so much. And please come next week. Dr. Nasreen Hussain will be talking about theater pedagogy as activism. And it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much, Mojisola, and thank you all so much. Jehan, over to you.
Yeah. So don't everyone jump off all at once. The recording stops now. So Falguni, you can stop the recording. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mojisola.